Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Tina Jha. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken begins his two-day visit to India on Tuesday in what will be his maiden trip to the country since assuming office. So on this edition of The Big Picture, we will discuss with experts the key issues that will figure in the discussions between both sides, the importance of these deliberations on the India-US partnership, and of course, the scope and the potential as well to bolster ties. And for this, I am joined by two distinguished panelists on the program. Let me first introduce them to you. I have with me former Ambassador Mr. Vishnu Prakash and Dr.Sreeram Chaulia. He is a foreign affairs expert. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on The Big Picture today. Dr. Chaulia, one of the prominent issues that the ambassador pointed out, of course, is Afghanistan and the worsening situation there. Now, India has a lot of concerns, of course, because it not just impacts us, but this stability and the security scenario in the region as a whole. So what are the concerns that India is going to raise with the US Secretary of State on Afghanistan?
Well, Tina, I think first of all, we would like to know the intent of the Americans post-withdrawal. I mean, that is unclear. And we would like to find out what is their strategy going forward post-withdrawal, because they have intensified aerial support in the last 1 week for the beleaguered Afghan National Defense Forces to push back the Taliban advance. But they are also saying that they will not be able to do it, at least not on a regular basis, after the end of August. And September 11 is the formal date of the end of all combat and operations there by the US. So then they are saying they will transition to a counter-terrorism role with an exclusive focus on Al-Qaeda and ISIS and other allied groups. So how will they be able to implement their counter-terrorism role without any air bases within Afghanistan or any significant ground forces? So the only forces they will have left are, a few hundred to secure the embassy, like security guards. That's it. So I think we would like to find out what they plan to do and how we can be useful in supporting their role for counterterrorism. It's quite clear that we have a counterterrorism concern, perhaps even more germane than what the Americans have, because it's very unlikely, as the US intelligence says, that another September 11 type attack is likely to be mounted from Afghan soil anytime soon. So as they are withdrawing, but still they would like to show that, as a great power, they are showing some responsibility and they still want to be seen to be contributing to regional security. So to what extent the US can contribute to regional security and how, modus operandi. And I think we should be bold. I think we have all the foundational defense agreements with the US signed, and which means mutual usage of our bases and military facilities by each other. So the Americans are looking for launch pads from which they can carry this over the horizon strike capability to keep the balance on the ground, so that it's not totally overrun by Taliban or by allied factions. So I think India should play a constructive role and offer our facilities to the extent possible. And our air support, our Air Force should also coordinate closely with the US Air Force, because otherwise air support is becoming a very vital area as far as holding the balance in Afghanistan goes. So I think that will be a major, and then of course we will want the US to understand our concerns regarding Pakistan's nefarious role. It's not new. We have been conveying this to them for more than 2 decades. Absolutely. But now that they are out of Afghanistan, their so-called reliance on Pakistan should not be the same as it used to be in the past. They are still apparently negotiating, trying to have some bases in Pakistan, but I don't think it will be allowed at all because of the hardline jihadist and anti-Western sentiment in Pakistan. So I think they should also tighten the vise on Pakistan in different forms, through IMF, through World Bank. We should be clear that if you really want a respectable exit from Afghanistan, the one easiest solution, direct way to hit the nail on the head, is to go after Pakistan with even stronger clarity of vision, which the US has not shown in the past. So I think those are the two main things we would want to convey. And of course, there's a regional groupings, many of whom are involved in finding a solution. And if the US wants to be part of it, they are part of the so-called peace process. We would want them to know that we want to be at the table. We want to be seen to be contributing to solutions. And I think the Biden administration has shown willingness to do so. They are not trying to exclude us from the picture. Like in earlier administrations, what used to happen was they were so enamored by the Pakistani angle that they would often try to keep us out of the picture. But I think now they realize that India is part of the solution. They're saying India is the linchpin for the region. So that's all good news, and we should hold them to account for that and to extract promises so that we are formally involved in as many solutions as possible for this region.
Moving on to the other aspect, one important aspect, Dr. Chaulia, that is likely to figure during the talks is the Indo-Pacific. Of course, that is one prominent area of discussion for both India and the United States. What is your guess? What could be the trajectory of discussions this time around?
Yeah, that's of course the long-term agenda for the underlying cement of the India-US strategic partnership, and it's becoming more and more relevant now because of the shifting balance of power in China's favor. So if Taliban is gaining ground in Afghanistan, that still is not of a earth-shaking nature that will change the global order. But China is changing the global order, and it's using more and more blunt and extremely aggressive means to enforce its will on weaker countries in the Indo-Pacific. So I think that is now becoming an urgent issue in a sense, but also something that will be constant, and we will see it for years to come. So Quad, of course, the summit has happened. That's very good. The first virtual summit, in-person summit, I think will be also a good show of signaling to the Chinese. And I also noticed that there's a lot of emphasis on also non-military forms of cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. It's not just the Malabar and other forms of joint exercises and freedom of navigation operations in South China Sea. All those, I think, are going to be enhanced. And the US is looking for greater Indian naval participation in all those things. But apart from that, I think the issue of the COVID-19 vaccines, which the US and other countries, Quad members, have committed to support India's production capability up to 1 billion or more doses financed jointly by the Japanese, the Americans, and the Australians. That, of course, will be critical, and we need to fast forward that because China is distributing its vaccines, however ineffective they are, and there are many reports of them having failed to protect the recipients. But nonetheless, they have the abundance, hundreds of millions of them, and they are, throwing them around. So, but what is interesting, Southeast Asian countries, which is at the heart of the Indo-Pacific, have realized their mistake of relying on Chinese vaccines. They are now asking for Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca. So, I think strengthening India's hand with our own domestic, indigenous manufacturers, and also the Western models, which can be quickly assembled and made here in India at low cost and then distributed across Indo-Pacific. I think that will be the real test for the next 1 year or so for the Quad Alliance. And infrastructure projects also, you see, there are countries like, Sri Lanka, which are critical for us, and where, again, the Chinese are mounting a major, encroachment. So I think we will be keen to partner with the US and other Quad members, how we can deter this, expanding Chinese shadow right in our backyard in the Indian Ocean region and beyond. And how my view is we should pick certain countries, specific countries, let's say Nepal or Sri Lanka or Myanmar or the Philippines, and we should jointly do some projects there, security, infrastructure, 5G, vaccines, all these come in. And the Europeans have also been wooed both by India and the US to come in. So if we do a big grand coalition only, can we really hold the Chinese juggernaut back? So I think that's a big geopolitical picture. And we should, my view is, we have done a lot of talking. We have done a lot of, consultations. Let us now start some projects and let it be visible. We have to come down to the tactical level now. Because strategy is there. The strategy of counterbalancing China is there. But tactically, how do we push them back in certain countries, select countries, with the consent, of course, of the host governments and in a creative way? I think that's the big challenge, and we should be discussing that when Secretary Blinken is here.
Okay, Dr. Chaulia, so in the geopolitical context and as far as Chinese hegemony is concerned, there are several challenges, of course, and the momentum needs to be sustained. That's what both of you are pointing out. But if we look at the bilateral aspect between India and the US, are there any sticking points at the moment? Whether it is about essential supplies of vaccines, the raw materials, or regarding indemnities, or regarding any other aspect which are sticking points which could also surfaced during the talks with the US Secretary of State?
Yeah, the trade wars that Trump administration had started luckily have been now laid low. And we don't see that kind of aggressive trade demands by the Biden administration like Trump was doing. So that's the good news. GSP preferences, we want them to be installed. There are, issues with regard to, like you said, with the raw materials. Even now, Serum Institute of India is saying they've been facing some shortages. Even the Biden administration said that they had lifted the embargo. And there is a general slowness with the US commitments. I mean, the US said that they were going to distribute a large amount of their surplus vaccines in Asia. And so far through COVAX and other means, but so far we have not received any. And the volume they're talking about for India is anyway too small for us, for our needs. So I think that's where we need to impress upon them. Travel, a just and a fair travel regime. These are sort of issues that need to be ironed out. But I think there's no big conflict of interest really at present because of the, preponderance of the Chinese threat. I think this relationship, the comprehensive global strategic partnership, as we're calling it, I think is just is going forward. But I think there are some who are saying there are going to be irritants with regard to human rights and democracy issues. But I don't think so because Biden administration, despite coming from the Democratic Party, it doesn't really emphasize those much, even if they are willing to do business with Russia. And have even waived the sanctions on Russia over the Nord Stream pipeline with Germany. They are trying to come up with an overall grand strategy that is to contain China. And the Chinese are openly accusing them that you are out to suppress and contain us. So I think if that is the case, I don't think any domestic, controversies need to be raked up. I think this is a media sensation, and I don't think Antony Blinken is, unwise enough to make a, big splash about these issues. So overall, I think, and by the way, the US is not a paragon of virtues itself. It has its own issues with racism and protests within the US. So I don't think we should worry about that too much. It's going well. But like I said, concrete action is always better. Deeds speak much louder than statements and comics.
With that, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you once again to both my guests for joining me on the program and putting forth your thoughts on the subject before us and our viewers. Pleasure having you on the show.